I just spent 4 years coaching youth club soccer here in the United States, and what I learned during my tenure as a coach is also what led me to quit. The US youth system is broken, and it's not just expensive, it's poorly structured, backwards in its priorities, and benefits all of the wrong people. Today, we're gonna break down exactly why US youth soccer is terrible, how it compares to the rest of the world, and what needs to change to grow the beautiful game here in the United States. Subscribe to Nitro Football, and let's hop into it. We can, of course, start with the elephant in the room. Playing youth soccer in America is ridiculously expensive. It's a fact that everybody knows, but not everybody knows why it's really expensive. These clubs will charge between $2,000 to $5,000 per player per year. A lot of times it can get more expensive than that, and it's not even including extra expenses like buying your kit to wear to trainings and games. That's a mandatory extra expense. It's not gonna pay for travel or even hotels for away days or showcases or tournaments that you're gonna have to stay in. It's not gonna pay for the extra private training for touches that you might need on off days. No. And so all of this adds up to thousands and thousands every single year just for one player. Whereas in Europe, the clubs invest in the players, not the other way around. In the USA, players that come from more poor backgrounds are not even given a fair chance. You could lose the next Lionel Messi at 9 years old because he couldn't afford a tournament in North Carolina. So his family said, it's not sustainable. We can't keep paying for this every single year. Even for non-profit clubs, one that I coached for several years, you still need to charge about $1,500 per season just to cover expenses. You're going to have to pay for coaches, field rentals. You have to pay for referees, league registrations, tournament registrations, league fees. All of the above aren't free, and nobody else is going to pay for this free soccer. So how does it actually happen in Europe, but not in the USA? European clubs are far more incentivized to invest in their youth systems than here in the USA. Take Birmingham City, for example. If they were to get promoted into the Premier League, the TV rights, the deals, the revenue that they get for just playing in the Premier League is going to change that club significantly. They're going to be able to bring in better players, and they're going to have the money to do so as well. If they were to get relegated, lots of players would leave. They'd go to other clubs playing at higher levels, and they wouldn't have nearly as much revenue to bring in other players. In both of those scenarios, having homegrown players is important. Take Jude Bellingham, for example. This is a player that they did not need to buy for several $million from another club. Instead, they invested in him for 9 years at the youth level, brought him up to the top team at 16 years old, and then at 17 years old, he was playing good minutes for their top team. They didn't have to buy a center mid from elsewhere. Then at 18 years old, they sold him for 30 million euros to Borussia Dortmund. That 30 million euros is going to pay for that academy for years on end, and other players are going to get the opportunity to play, develop, and not have to spend any money during that time. Now, there are some examples of this happening in the USA, like Cavan Sullivan, the 15-year-old wonder kid from Philadelphia Union, getting transferred to Manchester City for $5 million. Now, that's no chump change, especially for a 15-year-old transfer, but is that getting redistributed into the academy system like it would with Birmingham City and Jude Bellingham? No, because the franchise owners of MLS teams know that their team has no chance of getting relegated. 99% of other youth clubs in the area don't have a possible way to get into the MLS. The only way is to buy your way in a franchise that costs like $500 million. It's not possible. So these clubs who have developed players from 5 years old up to 17 years old, they get their players poached by MLS teams, and then they sell them on to other teams or use them in their first team, when in reality, it was the other local youth team that had developed them, and they got nothing for it. They had no transfer fee. They got paid nothing for it. Absolutely no incentive for these clubs to let those players go elsewhere. In fact, they're more incentivized to try to keep them around. Even if they're ready to become a professional, they might as well try to keep them around for another year or two, get a few $1,000s out of them, and they'll continue to win more games. It looks better for the club, but is it actually better for the player who it's supposed to be all about? Understanding that in Europe, clubs rise and fall based on performance, whereas in the USA, youth clubs rise and fall based on how many parents they can convince to enroll their kid in their club, you get why the cost is what it is. But that is only a symptom. The experience itself is terrible. This is the point in the video where you're gonna see a shift in my demeanor. As somebody who has experienced this for the last 4 years, it gets my blood boiling, and it might take you by surprise, but let's talk about tournaments and showcases. The stigma that these are the most important weekends of your season, that these are what determine the rankings and how good of a player or team you have, is blasphemous. It is so backwards. What are 13-year-olds traveling 300 miles to play 3 to 4 games in the span of 36 hours, sometimes in like 95-degree heat, going to determine for you? It is not a good way to develop players. This is stupid. It is players that are not going to give 100% in the first game or the second game because they know, well, I got another game at 4 p.m. and I know that team's going to be pretty good, so I can't give 100% now. But then by the time they get to the third game, they're so exhausted, cramping, a lot of times hurt by the time they get to the third or fourth game. And it really doesn't come down to what is the better team at that point. It comes down to which team has the deeper bench of players that still have gas left in the tank. It's not about who's the better team. But the parents already spent thousands of dollars to play for this team, and now they have to spend money on travel. And you know what that club that's hosting the tournament's going to do? They're going to add a stay-to-play scam where they're going to force you to stay in sponsored hotels so that they can get a kickback. Does that help develop the players? What business model is this? If I was a parent in that same situation, I would probably also say, yeah, we might as well get our money's worth while we're here and play a few games rather than just play one. It's not the right way to develop players. The best way would be you spend the week training to prepare for the match on the weekend. You play the match on the weekend at 100%. You give 100% because that's how you're going to play at the professional level. And a lot of times at these tournaments, they limit substitutions. You can't come back in the same half, or you have only moments to sub, or you can't come back in that same game. It only makes more injuries happen for these kids. They're trying to copy the Premier League system where they only play once a week. It makes sense. Yeah, you can only sub a few times in a game. If you're only going to play one game a week, it's not going to lead to so many injuries. And in fact, when the Premier League players have to play 2 games in a week too many times, they also complain about having to play too many matches.
It's difficult, of course, because first of all, it's too many games.
So what do you think the 13-year-old who just played 280 minutes in a weekend should be saying? Yeah, they're getting exploited. They're not developing, they're exploiting them. But parents, you're not off the hook for everything. I think it's the idea that since they're paying for their kid to be there, they have a say in how the game should go, who should play more minutes, how the training session should go, when and where training should be. It is a lot. And a lot of times these parents who are already putting pressure on coaches then start putting pressure on players during matches. I've had parents who are screaming at referees. They'll be even screaming at the other team's coach. They'll be screaming at the other team's kids. Are you a psychopath? The energy changes because of how the parents act on the sideline. And in my experience, 90% of parents are awesome, but all it takes is a couple of them to absolutely change what's happening on the pitch. These kids who are young and susceptible to the energy that is being screamed at them from the sidelines end up not even focusing on what we practice or how the game should be going. Instead, now they're going into challenges all rough and trying to hurt the other team because they're all riled up now because the parents couldn't control their emotions on the sideline. More reasons why US youth soccer is terrible actually comes down to the clubs themselves, where they'll move from 7v7 to 9v9 really quickly, to 9v9 to 11v11 really quickly. I think that it's going to be a lot better for these players to develop getting touches on the ball rather than using their physical attributes like pace and strength. It's a lot better for them to be playing in these small-sided scenarios a little bit longer rather than going to 11v11 really quickly. But why do they do this? Well, if you've got, let's say, 36 kids in a club, it's going to be a lot easier for you to make 2 teams of 18 players. That way you pay less coaches than 3 teams, and you have less tournament fees that you have to pay for rather than having 3 9v9 teams of 12 players each. If you have 3 9v9 teams of 12 players each, then you have another tournament fee, another league fee, another coach you have to pay. So why not bump them to 11v11 and say that's better for the kids? It's really not. They should be staying at small-sided and even prioritizing like futsal in the winters a lot more than they actually do, because this is what's going to actually technically develop them rather than throwing them into 11v11 as soon as possible. Here's the one truth about US youth soccer. It's not about development. It's about money. It's pay to play. It's ego over education. It's marketing over meaning. It doesn't need to be this way. We see how it is in Europe. And I would love to see my country win a World Cup before I die. But if this is the system that continues to be the status quo, I don't see it ever happening. Hopefully this insight into the US youth soccer system has educated those of you from other countries into how bad it actually is over here. And to those of you actively participating in this system, if this video has convinced you that things need to change, do not forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel right now, because it will not be the last time that we talk about this kind of stuff here on Nitro Football. Thank you guys for watching it all the way till the end, and I'll see you in the next one.